I was standing at the edge of the mat. My gym teacher said, okay, do a somersault. And I did something that was sort of like a somersault, but not exactly. And then he said, okay, backwards one. And I did one sort of like that. All the other kids did perfect forward somersault, perfect backward somersault. Then the next test, the cartwheel. Every child did a cartwheel. But I couldn't do one. And I landed very strangely, and everyone laughed. The whole class laughed. This was the last straw for me. I had been made fun of for a year and a half. I had moved to this school and I couldn't do any sports. I was terrible. I was so uncoordinated. It didn't matter what kind of ball was coming at me. I always thought it was somewhere different than where it was. I later learned I had something with my vision where I miscalculated. But I couldn't even play kickball. I always missed the kickball. I was always the last person picked on teams, and I could see the dread on the other kids' faces as I ended up on their team. And not only that, my clothes were different. I didn't have the brand names the kids had. They made fun of me. And yes, my legs, they kept growing like crazy. And yes, I was wearing floods. But I refused to tell my parents I was being made fun of about my clothes because I knew they were struggling. I overheard their conversations from the kitchen, from my bedroom. Somehow there were perfect acoustics in our home, where in my bedroom I could hear exactly what was being said in the kitchen. And yes, they couldn't afford much. I was never going to tell them about my clothes being too short and being made fun of for my clothes. And I must have had an incredibly interesting accent because all the kids laughed at the way I spoke. As a matter of fact, even the older kids would stop me in the hall and ask me to say the word lemon. I don't know how I said it, but they thought it was hysterical. This was embarrassing. It was devastating. I spent many days asking for the hall pass to go to the bathroom and making sure no one else was in the bathroom. I cried. I refused to tell my parents any of this. I didn't tell anyone. And in recess, I played alone because all the other kids were paired up with their best friend. The cartwheel, though, that was it. I was not going to be made fun of for not doing a cartwheel. My grandmother, she worked at a gymnastics camp every summer. She was the head administrator. And my parents had asked me earlier that year if I wanted to go to the gymnastic camp. And when I was made fun of because of my cartwheel, I thought, I am going to go to that gymnastic camp and I'm going to learn how to do a cartwheel. And when I come back next year, no one is going to make fun of me because I can't do a cartwheel. And that's what I did. I went to the gymnastic camp. And now this was an amazing camp. This camp was for children who were Olympic hopefuls. Yes, Olympic hopefuls. It was on a beautiful lake, with beautiful grounds, and the very first day, they tested us all. 4 categories. And you know where I placed. But it was even worse than that. I wasn't even in the lowest of the 4 categories. I was so low, they had to make an even lower category for me. But that did not deter me. My determination was that cartwheel. I was going to learn to do that cartwheel. 6 weeks away from my mom, dad, my brother, and my little poodle, who I missed greatly. I cried sometimes missing them. But I was determined I was going to learn to do this cartwheel. Not every moment of gymnastic camp was spent working on the cartwheel, though. There were other things like the uneven bars and the balance beam, the trampoline. The trampoline was the most fun. But what I did was when all the other children were off swimming or playing games, I would find a coach and I would say, can you teach me to do a cartwheel after dinner tonight? And I would find coaches who would work with me in their time off. And that's what I did. I scheduled every part of my free time with different coaches helping me learn to do the cartwheel. 6 weeks of gymnastics camp, and I was going to learn to do it. 5 weeks into camp, still wasn't doing a cartwheel. But I was not deterred. I was going to learn it no matter what. And then on the beginning of the 6th week, we had every other week a dance class. I was in the dance class dancing, and what I didn't realize is one of the coaches who had been helping me actually the most, spending the most time with me on the cartwheel, happened to be in the room that day watching. And at our next coaching session that I had talked her into helping me with, my cartwheel, she said, Laura, I noticed something. I noticed that you're really good at dancing. You really have a sense of rhythm. She said, you might want to think about taking dance classes next, after gymnastic camp is over. And I love to dance. I danced constantly around the house. I was always dancing. And I thought, oh yeah, I took dance when I was a little girl, but now that I was older, I hadn't taken any dance lessons. And then she said, I have an idea. I'm going to try something. Let's do something where we use rhythm, because you have a great sense of rhythm. Let's use rhythm for the cartwheel. And she started saying, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hand, hand, foot, foot. Left, right, left, right. And then she would say it as I did the cartwheel. And I started kind of getting a sense that there was this rhythm, which had never occurred to me about the cartwheel. And pretty soon I did something and it felt different. And she looked at me with big eyes and she said, that was a cartwheel. And I said, really? She said, yeah, do it again. And I did it again, the same thing. She said, you just did a cartwheel. I did? Well, let me do it again. I did it again and again and again. I was doing a cartwheel. I was actually doing a cartwheel. I grabbed her, I gave her a big hug, and I said, I'll be right back. And I ran as fast as I could all the way across the campus to my grandmother's office. And there she was, her and her assistant, working away. And I said, Granny, stop. We have to move everything to the side. And we moved her desk, we moved the chairs, it was a very tiny office. We moved everything to the side, but I was pretty small then. I said, watch this. And I did a cartwheel. And we were jumping for joy. We were so happy I could do a cartwheel. At the end of the camp, every year, there was an award ceremony. And this was the kind of awards where very few are given out. And there was most improved, there was neatest camper. And it was a beautiful ceremony with a bonfire late at night. They had this dancing, and one man was buried in the sand, the little straw so he could breathe coming out of the sand. And he would then jump up and there would be a bonfire and it would look like he had emerged from the fire. And while they were giving out the awards, I was very happy because I knew that these gymnasts could go on. Perhaps someday I would see them in the Olympics. And they got to the highest level of the awards, which was outstanding achievement. And I couldn't wait to see who were the ones who had achieved the highest level. Who were the ones who are our Olympic potentials for this year. And I was so happy at all the women that received their awards. And then I heard a name that I didn't recognize. And I blinked and I said, that name doesn't fit. And they said the name again. They said my name. And everyone in the campus, I was still sitting, realizing what was happening, stood up and started applauding and cheering. And in this surreal moment, I walked forward and realized I was the last person to receive this award, the highest award of the camp. Outstanding achievement. And I stood and looked at all the campers cheering me on. This lowly, terrible gymnast, uncoordinated, clumsy, clutchy. And I was receiving the highest award. I realized it wasn't about being the best gymnast. It was about accomplishing what I had set out to accomplish. And I have used that over and over and over again in my life.